what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. I know it's been so long since I've been live here, but with me today, we got ComicManAndy. How's it going, Andy?
It's going well, man. Dude, that opening was awesome. I got to figure out how to download that those 8-bit audio clips.
Yeah, I'll give you a site after we're done, actually. I found this site that has, like, every video game track from, like, retro games. So I'll definitely send you that. So, that's awesome. I made it like 5 minutes. It was pretty sweet. But I was like, I'm using the Super Nintendo effects for a night. But big thanks to everybody for joining us here on my channel. But yeah, I know we had the 7 o'clock Tuesday night live stream. It looks like we have a few people hopping from one live stream to another. So let me go to the chat. We got K Titus once again. Konnichiwa from Japan, my friend. Nice to see K Titus hanging out in the chat. Samuel David once again. Hello, Samuel. Nice to see it. That beverage he has looks so tasty, man. Makes me want to. I would love to have a cup of coffee, but it is 8 p.m. at night, and I'd be up till 4 in the morning then. So, and then of course we got ComicManAndy patrolling both spots in the chat and here as well. But hopefully we'll have one more Turtle Brother join us shortly. He had to go get some of his nephews some haircuts, so we'll see if he can make time tonight to talk a little bit of Turtles. But Andy, you want to tell these people where we read Volume 1 at?
Oh, we read Volume 1 on Modern Men about 4 weeks ago.
Yep, I believe it was week 46, so 3 weeks ago. Did leave the link down below, so after this, if you guys want to see our review of Volume 1, but reading Volume 1, like these volumes, these trades are so small that it just didn't feel too complete reading just one volume. So right then and there, we decided we need to keep going with this thing. So that's why we decided to mash up like 2 volumes tonight to talk about. So we're reading Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Volume 2 and Volume 3, which I think Volume 3 may be one of the best sequence of Turtles I've ever read, in my opinion. But we'll get there when we get there. But Andy, I guess you want to quickly recap what you thought of Volume 1, if you kind of remember anything from that review.
Oh, a little bit. The main point that I wanted to make is a lot of people are like, you haven't read Turtles from IDW? Nope. A lot of people are really surprised. And for me, really, it was one of those things where you've ever held on to a memory from your childhood and you're like, oh, this was amazing. The Last Starfighter movie or the Never-Ending Story or some of these things. And then you're like 20, 25 years later, I'm going to sit down and watch this, or I'm going to sit down and read this. And then it just doesn't hold up. And then that memory is crushed for you. I never wanted to crush those memories of the Turtles for me. So I was really shy about dipping my foot in that pool and getting back into Turtles all these years because I just didn't want those memories to be just changed. I really wanted to hold on to them, keep them. And initially, like I said, I was worried, and I grabbed that, and I'm like, well, we're diving into this for Modern Men. I opened up in those first couple of pages. What did I find? I was greeted with my 1990s Turtles exactly how I remembered them, look, shape, everything. I was transported right back to my childhood, and I was like, yes, I'm doing this. And I immediately realized that I immediately went to Comixology and looked. You can get like the first 8 volumes of this downloaded at no cost if you're an unlimited member.
Yep.
So I have all 8 volumes. I think I deleted everything off my iPad except for the bare minimums and downloaded 3.5 gigabytes worth of reads for Turtles and a lot of the boys and a lot of the other stuff when we went camping and just sat there and reading this. And yeah, Volume 1 was great. It really was. It took me right back to the 90s Turtles that I loved.
Yeah, I always try to sell people on this is like it takes like all of your favorite elements of Turtles throughout the last 35 years and it just puts them in a blender, and then this is what you get basically. So you have a little bit of that grittiness from the 80s Turtles, the original comic book. You have a little bit of that goofy comedy from the animated series. And I think what it reminds me of the most is the original movie. Just how that back in the day also kind of took the best qualities of the cartoon, took the best qualities of the original comics, and just blended them together into one awesome experience. This one goes a step further. Actually, I'd say it's 10 steps further because they have so much more content to compare itself to, especially the mid-2000s animated run. Eventually, we get to see the Purple Dragons in Volume 3, and I believe that's where they originated from, was that whole sequence of events. And yeah, they just, if it's something they kind of liked from a previous run, they just kind of plucked it and then put it in this run. So when I got a chance to interview Kevin Eastman at the previous Mainframe Comic-Con, he was basically saying this is his definitive Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is this run. So, and he gives Tom Waltz, the writer of this, all of the credit in the world. So I definitely don't blame him there at all. But let's say hi to the Mastodon. He's in the chat. He says, I think Never Ending Story and The Last Starfire hold up. But then that term hold up is a foreign concept to me. Yeah, there's definitely a few movies. Like I said, the first Turtles, obviously the original Star Wars trilogy, and then probably like Back to the Future. Honestly, it's 1 and 2. I don't know about 3. I wasn't a big fan of part 3, but those movies I could watch all day, anytime. So let's go ahead and get into our review here. We'll start, obviously, with Volume 2. So you got, like I said, Kevin Eastman, Tom Waltz on the writing duties. Usually I think Kevin Eastman is the plotter, and then Tom Waltz not only helps with the plot, but he's the one who puts the words on the page, basically. The art, though, and Andy, this is where we'll start because I know you're a little bit critical of the art this time around. Dan Duncan comes back on the art, but we also get a little bit of Mateus Santaloco in there, who, for me, I remember his art mainly from the Shredder and Hell series, which is way down the line for us in terms of reading sequentially. But I remember being really impressed with his art compared to the normal art. So do you want to talk about some of your criticisms of the art in these next 2 volumes?
I don't have a lot. I think Drew added 2 or 3 or more layers when we were talking about it on Modern Men a little bit, because we did end up going a little bit into Volume 2. I think my only real complaint, and it's kind of petty, is that the turtle heads get a little stretched, and they almost have like a bump cap on top, and instead of being the round, wider ones that I know and remember and love, they kind of get a little bit stretched. But going back and rereading Volume 1 and Volume 2 and Volume 3 today, yeah, I was less cognizant of that and more ingrained into the story, and the pacing of the book and the flow of the book actually distracted me from really paying a lot more attention to that than I did on the first read through. And I think I was just so hypercritical at the beginning when I was reading this about wanting to keep that original mindset or that original Turtles thought process from the 90s that the second read through of these first 3 volumes, I just kind of let that go and just read the story.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I'm just kind of comparing the art styles as you were talking, and I really think my main criticisms of the Dan Duncan art is I think he draws a heck of a mutant. I think that's why he was hired for the book. He draws pretty solid Ninja Turtles. I really enjoy his Splinter. Usually, like, Splinter will have like these dark, gritty looking eyes. Like you could just look at his characters like he's seen some stuff. So, but his human characters to me are the ones that are his weak spots. And I think that's why it was good they brought on Mateus Santaloco, because I think his human characters are phenomenal. Like the way he draws Shredder and even, Oroko Saki and that stuff, when we get into that storyline, that stuff is just beautiful, I think. I really like his contributions so far to this book. But as we kind of keep going here in this first volume, it's one of those kind of like in the first volume, how they're jumping back and forth through time from a perspective standpoint. In this one, you kind of get Splinter. He's sneaking out. He's up to something. And, of course, the kids, they're sprawling in the sewers, and we're kind of seeing how good of a fighter Raphael has became, not only mainly on his own, but with limited training from Splinter, because you got to remember, old Hob carried Raphael away when they were being mutated. So in the first volume, you only have 3 of the 4 turtles that are together, and they don't reunite them until the end of the first volume. So when you're seeing them spar and fight here, Raphael is just now learning the actual art of ninjutsu from Splinter at this point. So the fact that he's picking up and able to kind of blend with the other 3 brothers at this point should be pretty impressive. But this is when we get the time hopping perspective, and I want to get your opinion on what you think of this. Basically, they flat out kind of just tell you that the idea behind a lot of this is reincarnation. So you see the original feud that Splinter had with the Foot Clan back in feudal Japan, where they were pretty much, the Foot was hired to assassinate the king of this village, and instead Shredder is in charge of the Foot Clan back in the day. And he's basically like, we're not going to leave anyone alive. We're killing the whole village. And obviously that's where the schism between Splinter and Shredder started. And Splinter turned his back on the Foot, ran away with his family, but unfortunately his wife was taken in the process. But yeah, long story short, you get to see 4 kids. They're dressed in the turtle colors. You can kind of associate who is what from there. And eventually the Foot catch up to him and kill off the whole family. And that's when Splinter kind of swears vengeance upon the Shredder from that point. And even Shredder's like, what are you talking about? I'm killing you now. We're not going to see each other again. So what do you think about this whole idea of reincarnation just being like, just bam, there it is?
Is this, I'll ask one question first. Sure. Is this new to the Turtles universe? Is this the first iteration of that idea, or was this something that they had carried over for something else? The idea of reincarnation and Buddhism, or was this? It's really interesting.
To my knowledge, like it varies per whatever you look at. Obviously, there's been so many versions over the years. Like obviously in the movies, Splinter the Rat, you literally see this like a little claymation rat doing ninja moves that his master is doing, and his master doesn't even realize he's teaching him. He's just a rat in a cage hanging out, watching his master practice. So he follows his teachings. So when the Shredder attacks, like you actually see like a little rat leap at human Shredder and slice him in the face. Then he has to wear a mask after killing his master, basically, Hamato Yoshi. The other versions, like Hamato Yoshi, actually does turn into a rat somehow. So it depends what version you're paying attention to. I think that was the TV series. Yoshi just turns into a rat, saving this batch of turtles. So he got covered in the ooze, saving the turtles, basically. But this is the first one that I kind of know about that had reincarnation. If Volume 1 had introduced it, then I need to read that issue.
Okay. I think this adds an incredibly amazing layer of depth to it, in my opinion. When we look at Volume 1 and we talk about, I really enjoyed the fact that April was a research intern who happened to be in that route. Looking back on the original Turtles movie and some of the original stories, April being a reporter fits in the 80s, right?
Yes.
It fit then. Now it's kind of like, that's like the only thing I think that doesn't really hold up for me very well.
Sure.
So her being a research intern in Volume 1, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and they actually make it work pretty well in this volume, because one of my other criticisms of Volume 1 is April's kind of there. She's in the backstory, which I thought was kind of cool. But once everything's going in the present, they're mutated, they're living their life, April kind of feels like just an extra tacked on storyline. But in this one, they actually use her background to tie her in really well, where she is looking to tutor somebody in return for basically self-defense lessons, because she feels so helpless after dealing with that lab incident and the Foot Clan breaking in there and making her feel helpless. She doesn't want to feel helpless ever again. So that's where Casey and April kind of meet for the first time in this volume, where Casey needs the opposite. He needs to have someone tutor him because he's about to be kicked off his hockey team, because now instead of studying and going to class, he's fighting crime at night and sleeping in the day. Mm-hmm. Whereas April is smart because, hey, she's working in a lab, of course. That tells you she's a smart cookie right there. And then now she's offering tutoring lessons for any topic in return for self-defense lessons. So there's a match made in heaven right there, basically, between April and Casey, and it works April into the main line with the Turtles and Splinter pretty well, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And let's come back to the reincarnation aspect when we move on to Volume 2, or when you're ready for that, because there's a much larger chunk there that I'd like to explore with you as well.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, April being a research intern and the whole storyline, that throwback, or that callback to being in the lab with, Splinter talking about being pierced by a sword he had never felt before or seen before, and then it opened up his mind with the injections, and then began to become more aware, and then he talks about finding the turtles and realizing we're back. These are my boys. That was it fits. It fits and flows so well. And it's, if you ever watched the movies or have you ever read any of the earlier books and sat and like had questions, I don't have any questions reading volume 1, volume 2. They answer a lot. They fill in a lot of plot holes.
Yeah, absolutely. My other favorite part, and this is all still just not only the first trade we're talking about tonight, this is just one issue we've covered so far. The end of this first issue is probably one of my favorite moments in all of the series so far. And that's where you find out, what was Splinter doing? Why was he out sneaking around in the middle of New York City and, you know, basically doing something he would tell his sons not to do? And he comes home and he basically is just like, you know, we found your brother. You guys don't need to wear his colors anymore. We're all one clan, but we're all individuals as well. And we should celebrate that, you know, uniqueness and individuality. So he uses this opportunity to give the turtles their colors, basically. So Michelangelo gets the orange bandana first, which he's so happy with. And then Donatello and Leonardo get their purple and blue. And then Raphael, he probably feels a little bit left out. He doesn't get a cool new bandana, but he gets something even better, honestly, and that's his size finally.
Yep.
So he finally gets his weapon. And yeah, they have this nice family moment. And that's kind of where this issue ends, is that, like, also it just happens to be Christmas. This is their Christmas gifts from Splinter. And I kind of like their Christmas tree at the end. It has 4 bulbs on it, and you can guess the 4 colors on the tree. But you also kind of see in 2 very quick panels the other 2 Christmases that are going on family, and you get to know a little bit about these characters in just one panel, and that's Casey and April's Christmas, where April, she's gone home with her mom for Christmas, so you see that, you know, she's embraced warmly by her mother. But then you have, you know, the yin to your yang. You have Casey is visiting his mom. Unfortunately, it's a grave, and he's just putting 1 lone rose on his mother's grave, and it just says, "I miss you, Mom." So that kind of tells you a lot about each character in just 1 panel each. So what did you think about the sequence of the turtles getting their bandanas?
I liked it better on the second read through. On the first read through, I was a little confused at first because I had forgotten a major point that was being made was that Splinter had them all wearing Raphael's color while they were searching for solidarity. Is that the correct pronunciation? The camaraderie and the cohesion with the unit. So that made a lot more sense to me on the second read through. And then this brings me to a point when they were receiving their bandanas for Christmas. It made me realize the extra layers they hid in this that were incredibly cool was about a couple of pages back when it talks about they're back in feudal Japan, and he's run away, or he had run away, and he was carrying his boys away. And if you look, page 16 of the trade on the bottom left panel, he's carrying Leonardo, he's carrying Raphael, and I'm sorry, he's carrying Donatello and Raphael, and Leonardo carrying Michelangelo.
Yep.
Never have I ever been able to kind of put the turtles and their individuality or their mentalities as individuals into a perspective until now. You realize the kind of mannerisms and the way they act as turtles, you kind of understand now. They were much, there was an age difference. There's a big age difference in between the 4 of them, but they put that into perspective very well on paper. That was a really cool detail that I think they really worked hard to add and notice that, and have the people reading notice that too. I picked up more on that on the second read through, and it was I was kind of drawn to that in rereading it because of that Christmas tree scene and the different colors. And then I started going back and looking, oh yeah, they're all wearing the same color robes in the callbacks too.
Yeah, I really like the little parts. Like you said, they do such a good job in this first issue of just like using a single panel to tell you something. So I definitely like that panel you brought up where it's, Donatello and Raphael are being carried by Yoshi, and then like who's the most dependable one in that group that has to carry another member of the family, and that's Leonardo.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he is obviously the leader. He's probably the most oldest and seasoned of the kids. And then obviously he's having to hold Mikey, who's, the youngest mentality, obviously. So, yeah, they tell you a lot without just blatantly putting it in front of you. And I love when comics do that. So, very strong. I mean, I think this was technically issue 5 of the Turtles run. But yeah, probably one of my favorite issues I've read in this entire series so far. And like I said, I've got a long way to go and read, obviously, but that is one of the strongest individual issues. And obviously it holds up in this tray as well. But I do want to go to the chat. My Mastodon had some good quotes here I want to get back to. We were talking about Back to the Future 3 earlier. He says, Back to the Future 3 was fun for what it was, but not necessary. Kind of agree with that. It was kind of cool seeing the first time that, 2 movies were kind of recorded together simultaneously, and they had the opportunity to, like, have the cliffhanger ending and then revisit that, like, 1 year later. And then he says, kind of like the third TMNT movie, probably not necessary either, except for the fact that Back to the Future 3 was fun. Turtles 3 was not fun. Except for Casey. Casey Jones carried that movie for what he could. I love Casey Jones in that one. But any scene he's not in, no thank you. Splinter didn't even have a torso in that. He was just a little top of the puppet that kept him in a train car the whole time, so I didn't have to work that hard on him. Drives me crazy every time I see it.
I think I watched the first and the second movie immediately after reading Volume 1 on Modern Men that night. I stayed up super late and watched both of those movies. But and you know what, the layers and levels of detail that they add to this when you stop and realize what you're seeing, and then it opens up the book even more to you, and that changes the pacing quite a bit. The first time I've read through these books, well, those were pretty quick. Then when you start to catch on to the extra layers and details that they've added, it forces me to read it a little bit slower, which actually improved the pacing, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Like I said, like going through this issue 6, just kind of getting a couple notes to talk about here. It's pretty action-packed for the first like 8 or 10 pages here. So it kind of starts off with this like French parkour ninja guy. Don't know too much about him, to be honest. He reminds me a little bit of like a Yusaki Yojimbo. Probably not supposed to be, but maybe that's just me reading into it. But basically he has he's trying to run from the foot, but unfortunately the Turtles, in trying to keep their cover, they decide to stay in their cover, and the guy just dies. A little bit of a weird decision there, but whatever. But he does get to say one thing to the Turtles, and luckily Donnie's there to translate, and all he tells them is war is coming. So what did you think of this first sequence, Andy? Just all action? Did you read anything else into this?
I was trying to figure out where the French ninja was really coming into play. He obviously passes away, so he won't play any other role that we could think of going forward unless there's some other reincarnation aspect that comes in. Literally, maybe he's just the messenger for the war is coming. But they do tie the parkour, the fact that he's French, and then they realize that he's using a French style of ninjutsu, I think it was, or I forget the exact term. So they were making some connections, but I was struggling as a reader to make some connections on how he really served a purpose in the story beyond just being the messenger. Because it was a number of pages, and it was quite action-packed.
Yeah.
There's a lot of time spent to deliver that message that war is coming.
Absolutely. That's what I was going to say. When 5 had so much to it, issue 6, because that's probably about half an issue or a third of a comic, just to have this one scene. So obviously it's important in some way, but maybe in the grand scheme of things, I'm more interested in seeing, the other next 2 scenes, which are like 1 page piece, surprisingly. That's where you get Baxter Stockman and Old Hob kind of talking about what they're going to do next. Obviously, Baxter Stockman is getting pressured from Krang and that whole army to get their super soldier serum, basically. I think they even just start calling it that. They're not trying to masquerade. Basically, he wants that vial of ooze so Krang can make his super soldiers and win the war that's going on in his dimension. And Old Hob is, unfortunately, Baxter Stockman's scapegoat and trying to, control what we're about to find out are the Mousers and kidnap Splinter. The other storyline that lasts a single page so far is Casey Jones dealing with his annoying drunk dad who plays a crazy role later on. You get him, and then you get him getting ready to contact April. Speaking of contacting, we got contact right here on the stream because YouTube is 90. Drink it in, man. How you doing, Chad?
What is going on, Seawood? What is going on, Andy? And for all the 90 holics in the chat, YouTube is 90. I apologize for my lateness. Been running around. I had to look good for the show, as you guys can see. And I'm happy I could be here and be talking some turtles, man. So Cowabunga, where are you guys so I can just hop right into it?
We haven't gotten too far because we overanalyzed the first issue. So we're only on like issue 6 of this second trade here. So we were just talking about how the Frenchman got killed on the rooftop in the first trade we're reading. And then basically Old Hobb and Baxter Stockman are talking. And then Casey's getting ready to contact April. But what I was going to ask Andy about next, you said you want to get back to it. And I think this is our opportunity because I swear in this one, I don't know if they watched Lost and saw the conflict between Jack and John Locke in that about fate versus science. But in this one, in the next couple of volumes, you almost kind of have Leonardo as your Jack Shepherd type character who's all about, he's actually John Locke, who's all about faith and, embracing this idea of reincarnation that Splinter has presented to him and the fates and stuff. Whereas Donnie, obviously being the scientist of the group, he doesn't just buy into this. He needs concrete evidence and facts. So, Andy, going back to all this stuff about reincarnation, what do you think this presents to the Turtle Gang?
Man, I don't know. The thought process of the extra depth and layer that it added in that first issue was amazing. And I wonder if it's just going to continue to serve as a character building point and adding more depth to each individual turtle and how they feel and how they sit with that. And it gives us as readers a perspective of how they process this, because I hope they continue to utilize this going forward and build those layers with each character, because it seems like a lot of work to put that in there to not keep going back to it or keep utilizing it.
Absolutely.
And how it sits with them that they were basically reincarnated. And now I'm rambling and I'm losing sight of your original question, but dude, it just adds so much more to the read. It's crazy.
Yeah, not only that, I like how in a little bit later, especially in volume 3, you kind of start to see that creative divide between Donatello and Leonardo, where of all people, usually in most interpretations of the Turtles, it seems like it's Raphael who's always kind of challenging the leadership there. But in this one, it's almost more Donatello questioning the leadership of Leonardo. And we'll talk about that scene a little later. But Chad, what is your take on all this stuff about introducing the idea of reincarnation to the Turtles?
So of course, as you know, Seawood, and I kind of went back and reread some of the issues because it's been quite some time because we've gotten so many issues from the original. But as I go back and reread it, it's one of the things that I loved about this IDW run that I used to tell you about when I was trying to get you on it.
Yep.
How they incorporate, or how Eastman incorporates that reincarnate. It's your Turtles from your childhood, but it's got this adult feel, so to speak, to that interview that you guys had. That's what this run is. It's his ultimate vision of the Turtles. It still has that, adult feel, but kind of introducing us still with that kid and kind of playfulness. I just think it's great because I really believe it's the core of what you're really going to see as you start to see the Turtles. Sorry, as you guys heard, little man, he's trying to go to bed. But it's really the core of what you're going to see as the Turtles really start to tap into this kind of spiritual reincarnation world as you go on in the volume. So, and then to your point as well, see what about Leo, he keeps that true loyalty to Splinter throughout this entire run. He doesn't veer from that. And I think you nailed it on the head as how you described him. He, no matter what, and you saw it in that first volume, as they're looking for Ralph, he doesn't care, Splinter said, we need to find him. That's what we're going to do. And, that's where you start to see those seeds of Donatello, questioning like, why are we doing this? Like, what, we're just listening to Splinter because of him, because being Splinter. So I think you're right on the nose with that, and it's gonna set up more things to come, and I don't want to like spoil that. So
sure. Well, before I keep going, I do want to say hi to a few people in the chat. We got the Great Legend show in the chat. What's going on, Legend? He's still trying to pop. Every time I do a live stream anymore, he always tries to get those cheap pops in there. So he's saying hi to the Mastodon, but he likes Donatello as well. And then we got Drew Manchu, baby. What's going on, Drew? Nice to see Drew and Legend in the chat. Mastodon's still paying attention. Always happy to see the Mastodon out and about. But the last part of this issue, and Chad, I was saying earlier, like I felt like the one like fifth wheel, if you will, in the first trade was April. She had her part in the like flashback storyline, but once you got to the present and caught up with everything, she's not really involved with the Turtles and that stuff yet. And then this is where she finally gets wrapped in, where Casey, he needs that tutoring so he can stay on the hockey team. So what did you think about the way they had to finally bring in April?
I like the way they introduced her as well, kind of being that, student. It looked like she, kind of like an internship, so to speak, in that first volume. You know what I'm saying? Like as she met Splinter and the Turtle, so to speak. No, I think it's cool how they introduced her this way, and it's not like, I guess, the normal April O'Neil that we know, like reporter-wise. It's a little different, and it's also, I think, gives the story a little more layers and gives her more layers as a character, and giving her more ties to these characters, and of course, this new relationship that she's about to establish with Casey Jones, as you start to get that in this issue.
Absolutely. What about you, Andy? Did you like the way they had to meet here finally?
I did. Like Chad said, man, it adds layers. It builds the building of a relationship, and I'm looking forward to see where that goes. Because Chad, I haven't read past volume 3 yet.
No, and that's fine. That's fine.
That's where I'm at. So a lot of my answers are going to sound a little short-sighted. It's because really I'm short-sighted on the read right now.
No, bro. As long as you're reading it, that's all I care about. See what would tell you, man.
I've been buying all the books since 70-something or 80-something when Carson told me, he's like, you just go buy them. But I've been stacking them up for a rainy day, and until on Modern Men or another channel, we could sit down and read these first chunk of volumes so I can get caught up.
Yeah, well, hey, we're doing it, baby. That's what I like to see.
Who gave me that advice? This guy down here.
Hey, well, actually, I mean, not today, but shout out to Jabroni, and you're wearing his shirt. But he was the only one in the community that I knew that was on Turtles when I first started talking about it. And it's like, yo, people gotta read. It's like, if you're a Turtle fan, you need to read this. And then we know that Who-Dat was on it, but I probably hadn't established that relationship with Who-Dat yet. So, but yeah, man, it's like, this is only for me, the tip of the iceberg. They really take it some places, a little further down. But let's not get too far ahead for Andy's sake. Let him experience that.
Yeah, so I forgot about the actual conclusion, issue 6. So you get introduced to the Mousers. Baxter Stockman, of course, created the Mousers, just like in previous interpretations. He's just screwing with Old Hob this way. It's like almost Old Hob's like his play toy until he needs something from him. Old Hob will fail, then he'll get mad at Old Hob, and that's kind of the relationship they have. But we'll go ahead and move on to chapter 3, and I'm guessing later down the line we're going to see a lot of this guy. We get introduced. Well, maybe not introduced, but reintroduced to Krang once again. And you see what he's going through on the planet Neutrino. And you hear the name Captain Trag, which I had that action figure as a kid. And this is where some more of that nostalgia gets to come in. And you really get to see what the updated Krang looks like here. And I think it's a nice little update. He has this dark green mech suit. And then you kind of just see him in the chest instead of the belly part like the old action figure. So what did you guys think about our first big look at Krang here?
Oh, awesome. I mean, I guess, it has that classic Krang feeling, so to speak, when you see him in the mech suit. And I also love how they kind of I mean, I guess if you're not a Turtles fan, like how they introduced him in those, first couple issues, like just by saying his name, you know what I mean? Like, Crane needs this done. General Crane needs this done. So, of course, as Turtle fans, immediately like, oh, yes. In the beginning, they're giving us, villains I can relate to or know. And then if you're a new, reader, it's cool how they introduce them to you, and you got a few issues until you actually get them. It's like a big reveal, so to speak. So I love it. And I like that first panel shot where it's from behind too, that that when you first see him, and then you really don't get that like full blown panel until he's like face to face with Baxter. So so good, man.
He needs a suit. I don't know where his suit's at, but I do. So there you go. I had to get my Krang out for that.
I really enjoyed it because, like 90 said, the classic feel of Krang was there, and yet as being a familiar you're familiar with this villain. Yet they did add, they kind of teased it for you, even though it's not new for you as a reader or a Turtles fan. They teased it enough that when you do get that reveal, you're almost just as excited as the first time around.
Absolutely. So as we keep going, Mikey's showing Raph where they get their food from. This guy named Rupert. He's like, yeah, I was eating out that guy's dumpster. I'm like, well, he's just giving us pizza, man. All I have to do is ask. So like that little scene. But the main part of this issue has to come with going back to the Mousers. Before that, you see Leo and Donnie. They're still arguing about this reincarnation stuff. And that's when Leo actually gets a crazy vision of his dead mother. And he doesn't really want to talk about Donnie because, number one, like he's probably not going to believe him anyway. And number two, obviously, it's probably a pretty sore spot for the group. And then that's when you see the Mousers pop in. They cut the scenes between that and just April and Casey bonding. But yeah, this is just it's a pretty heavy actions issue where you get to see Old Hob basically attack and kidnap Splinter. And then meanwhile, you have Krang. He's in like this is probably like the funniest part of Krang because he's like in this suit where it covers him up, but it has like a black sheet over where his face is actually at. So what did you guys think about the use of the Mousers here?
Great usage as far as like we kind of like, I guess we kind of can tell, just like that entry level villain, so to speak, just a little teaser because we know where it's leading to. But to your point as well, Siwa, just, something again that if you were someone that watched the show, it's just something you can grab on, relate to, and be like, all right, cool. Like I know what this is. And then the other thing I just love how they use Hob, from the beginning as well, and really how they really set him up and how he becomes more of like a main character, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like it's really giving him like some light, and then even the whole like origin, with the Turtles and how it's connected with him and how he has that hatred, so to speak. I loved all of that, and like I said, I think it's just it's a nice, slow, like baby feed, so to speak, to like what's next to come. And so, because the next thing after this is setting up hopefully more, Krang as we would want.
Yeah, it's funny you mention Old Hob in that way. I kind of compare him to like, and this is a random comparison, but I think of Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, that series, how I feel like he is supposed to be a one-off villain for your protagonist to fight. Buffy or Raphael win the day or whatever, you never see that character again. But somehow, like, either they became popular or the writer really liked the character or so on and so forth, that you get to that point where they keep coming back time and time again. And then, like, in here, like, I never expected Old Hob to be in, like, the issues I started reading when he told me to pick it up around, issue 90 to 100. But boy, does he play a huge part in that. It's mind-blowing that, Old Hob actually lasted the whole run so far, and to your point, I guess you don't realize how much of a character they really developed him as, to get all the way to those issues, and then as you get down there, you see the development of his character as well, which is cool, and it's different. It's something that you probably don't even see coming, especially with how it's set up in a sense. But I love me some Hob. I think how, like I said, they introduced the Mousers is cool. And like I said, you get that feeling of like, all right, the Mousers are going to be one and done.
But they, as you mentioned, like it's crazy how they took Hob and just like, all right, we're gonna just keep going forward with him, because I think that was one of those characters too, like on the show that people loved.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Andy? What did you think about Hob and the Mouser scene?
I hope the Mousers aren't one and done in this, because I was immediately transported back to the arcade game when I saw those with that very classic design and awesome classic look.
I'm like trying to shake them off in the game. You have to like hit the button.
I really enjoyed that aspect. I think it adds more depth and layers to the villain aspect of, they're not one-sided. They're multi-sided, and creating these robots for the military. It was a good backdrop, a good backstory to why they were created. And I think I even vaguely remember that from the video game too.
Yeah.
But I liked it. It was great. It was a great point to introduce those, and I hope they definitely aren't a one shot. I definitely hope they're around for more.
Yeah, to me, they definitely felt more threatening here, especially that splash panel you get of, where Splinter, he's passed out already, which I think that says a lot right there, that they were able to incapacitate Splinter. Well, especially then the next trade we'll talk about here in a little bit, like he whips everybody's ass. But here, like they got the better of Splinter. Maybe it's just because they got him when he was in his home or what, but you get that panel of a passed out Splinter. Michelangelo's trying to rescue him, but Michelangelo could barely stand up to all of the Mousers. So heck of a scene there. But you know what else is a heck of a scene? This chat over here. I definitely want to hop into the chat here while Chad gets his share screen set up there.
No, I was just trying to show that scene that you're talking about.
Awesome. We still got 90s in the chat as well, so see if you guys stop by. We still got the Mastodon. He says, not for the Heat. Then that's a different story. Go Heat. We got Ruben Guzman. What is going on, Ruben? I know that guy's becoming a fan of TMNT. So definitely shout out to Ruben Guzman. Like seeing him in the chats. And then we got Chad, Comic Core Chad, stopping by for that. Yeah, definitely don't forget to subscribe. All these guys, their link is in the description below. And maybe leave a thumbs up or two while you're around. So, yeah, you get that crazy panel of Michelangelo getting bested. And then this is kind of where you get, go back to Baxter Stockman and Krang. They're still trying to figure out how to get Splinter and that stuff. And then you kind of get your first glimpse, at least in this run, of Alopex. So, Chad, what can you tell us about Alopex? Because Andy and I were kind of talking before we went live about Alopex and her origins. And is this truly the first time you see Alopex is in this series?
Correct. First time that you see her. And I can pull it up. As most of you may know, like since Little 90, I've been doing a lot of digital read-ins. It's just easier for me. But yep, there she is. Becomes a major player as well throughout the series, later on throughout the story, and just again, just shout out to bringing in another character, someone that you don't realize that is probably going to play like an important role, but just the way they introduce her, and then of course her whole character build and what will happen like as you go on through the issues with her. So super cool. And then I mean, for me personally, the artwork throughout this as well, just awesome. Probably doesn't get enough credit, as most people probably aren't like super fans of the artwork, but I dig it. And there's that Krang shot that you said. So, but no,
let's crack you up.
I don't know, like just this beginning of the story, both I think really just the first 3 volumes, like it's just great storytelling, great origin telling for all these characters, and it's literally like just starting as you're getting these layers, and as you go on, these layers start to like unfold, and just all about it, man.
Absolutely.
So, but yeah, back to that shot. You can go to Andy.
So that shot right there, it struck up a conversation with Carson and I before we went live, before you came in. It says right down there, the little moniker right there, it says C. Raphael Micro BC. So I was thinking that it was the Micro series from the 80s or the 90s, way long ago, which I had never read. So I was asking Carson, I was like, well, how long has Alopex been around?
I think there might have been so if I'm not mistaken, there's a ton of micro
Yeah.
mini series that they did with IDW. So it could be on one of theirs. Now, this, for instance, this was my first introduction to her, you know, reading the comics and everything like that when I hopped on it. And when I hopped on this run, they were on issues, I want to say like 54 or 55. So like I was like already late the train, so to speak. But you know, I can go ahead and see if it's actually that.
Carson looked it up, and it's a newer miniseries.
Yeah, I want to say it's a newer IDW run that they did. You know, I guess right before this, it was probably like something just, you know, like, hey, we're not sure if we're going to really do this, and they probably gave it a shot. And, all right, Eastman, go ahead.
Yeah, either way, this is pretty a new character to the universe, so we're seeing this unfold.
Correct.
Yeah. If you read the Ultimate collections as IDW hardcovers, they collect so many like micro series and one shots that I was telling you guys, some of them barely even have any main run Turtles in them at all. I think there's one that doesn't even have an issue of main run Turtles in it. There's so many minis and all that stuff. I think IDW, like I think there's always 2 Turtle books always going on at any given point in time. Because like, they'll always have this, and then 2 weeks later you'll get like Raphael micro series, or like lately they did the Jenica series along with the regular series.
And before that, it was the TMNT universe.
That's right. Yeah, they had the TMNT universe. Then they had the Shredder in Hell. So there's been all kinds of ones. Yeah. I think there was like Bebop and Rocksteady versus a universe or something, and yeah, a whole bunch of stuff that like. I kind of appreciate reading this in a trade format, though, because sometimes I just want the main meat and potatoes of the story, and then I can go search later if I want to go read, say, the Raphael micro series, which, if I kind of remember, I think there's a cover tribute on one of those where it does have Raph and Alopex instead of Raph and Casey, like the original Raphael one-shot, which is the first appearance of Casey Jones.
When they're on the wall?
Right. Yeah, I think that exists out there if I remember right. But let's move along here because we're 47 minutes in. We still got another trade to go, so we'll kind of go breeze through the rest of this issue here. So basically, they lose Splinter to Old Hob. That's not good, obviously. But the other thing that's happening is Casey and April. They're still together. They're still hanging out. But one word comes up in their conversation when Casey's asking about like what April does for a living and that stuff. And the word Splinter comes up and he goes, "Did you say Splinter?" And that's when Casey knows that she's got to meet the Turtles. She's the person, based on what Raph has told him about his origin and that stuff. Casey knows that like April and the Turtles need to meet at this point. So they drive to the sewer manhole in a very familiar van, which hopefully Donatello finds this van later. And yeah, the Mouser fight happens. Eventually, Leonardo's the one who comes up with the strategy on how to beat the Mousers and the programming. And the issue pretty much ends kind of like the movie where April meets the Turtles for the first time. And she hears actually, I don't think she hears their names yet. She just sees the Turtles and faints. And that's where this trade ends. So what did you guys think about the end of this trade? Chad, I'll start with you.
Bro, to your point, what I loved about it is like how she meets him at the end. You get that reminisce. She freaks out and I'm just going to show that last panel because I brought it up real quick.
Get your screen back up here.
Yeah, it just so good. Of course, Donnie's the one to figure out how to beat the Mousers.
It's Donnie. That's right.
And he would be the one with the tech aspect of it. And man, all about it. I really loved how they introduced April in the earlier issues, and like as I mentioned earlier, as they kind of like worked her into the story with Casey. As Casey kind of became more of like a main character. Meeting up with Raph and all that. And I just really think that if you weren't a Turtles fan and you were reading this, like you were hooked just on story, because I think the suspense, the that shock aspect at the end of all these issues in the early part is just it's right on point as being a like what you want from your Turtles, so to speak. And I just loved that. I guess Casey and what they were at the diner having coffee, like talking about it. It almost seemed like a date as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And like how they're even throwing those little seeds in like at the beginning. So just all about it. It just hyped you up for the next volume, obviously, because because you're like, all right, I got to know what happens, and how does April help the turtles find Splinter, right? Because that's got to be the next thing, right? That's got to be the next thing, or that's what you hope as a Turtles fan.
What about you, Andy? What are your final thoughts on Volume 2?
I like the way they wrapped it all up at the end there. April feigning the controller falling out of old Hobbs' pocket, and them finding that, and then being able to wrap it all up with a nice little bow on it for the end. I really enjoyed the way they did that.
Yeah, there's such like a nice contrast in that volume too. It starts off with like this like warm family meeting where they get their colors and their size, and then it goes to the polar opposite where they kind of lose their father for the first time, and they kind of have to deal with that. But also the wild card and all this, April finally gets introduced into the whole thing. So even though it was only like 4 issues of comic and one of them had like a ton of just plain action in it, there's a lot to absorb in this first trade we're talking about tonight, at least. So we'll go ahead and get into the next trade because it obviously starts off in a pretty big way where they're slowly finding out, April finally comes to, of course, and she goes, "What are your names again?" And they name off their names, and she's like, "Oh my God, I named you." So, it's like this realization that these are the turtles from that lab. So also we cut to old Hob and, this other scientist who kind of turns out to be a mole here in a little bit. They're keeping Splinter intact. I like how even though Splinter is chained to a table and in a cage, he still kind of finds this way verbally to get the upper hand on old Hob. So what did you guys think of this scene where he's basically just mentally punking out old Hob, even though he is behind a cage and strapped to a table?
That's just showing his true sensei ways, right? Like, and just knowing like half the game's in the head, right? If I can beat you mentally, I know I can beat you once I get out there. And just awesome, and then to your point, like to see him like on a board strapped up, in a cage, it just, I don't know. I mean, granted, he's a lab rat, and I guess that like seems normal, but just the way they have it, I don't know, that panel and Hobbs looking down at him, I just love it, man. And he just really gets under Hobbs' skin, and that's the whole point.
Yeah.
He's trying to do. That's really what he wants to do, and he does it.
Yeah, and being a former lab rat, being stuck in a cage is nothing that he fears by any means. It's not something he's unfamiliar with. And like you said, that's his sensei ways. He gets the upper hand verbally and gets into Hobbs' brain and sets him off. And that shot of Hobbs spinning the scissors, I was telling Carson earlier, I was like, this makes me think of MC Hammer with with those balloon pants or parachute pants they called them, and the suspenders hanging down and the super tight shirt. And I'm like, this just they've continued to find ways to bring me back to the 80s and the 90s.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I didn't even notice the suspenders until you just mentioned them. We got another big turtle fan who just hopped in the chat. We got Who Dat Comics. Hey. What's going on, Who Dat? I know he loves him some TMNT for sure. Nice to see Who Dat in the chat for this one tonight. So we'll go ahead and keep plugging along here. So once again, it's Donatello, man. His mental prowess is just coming through here. He figures out a way to track the Mousers back to their point of origin using, one of the not so destroyed Mousers. And the other reveal here is to April from Casey. It's the least surprising thing she's seen all day is when Casey pulls out that mask. Yeah. And it turns out he's a vigilante as well. So I really like these two scenes here of the turtles busting up this lab, getting ready to go see if they can find Splinter, and then, April wanting to help out. So what did you guys think of, once again, April here kind of coming through?
Just establishing herself as April as we know it, right? Kind of so to speak. Finally, all right. I mean, it took her a lot to bring it all in, right? Realizing, all right, the turtles, I named them, but then, that April instinct kicks in where she really, as she showed in those first issues, like before they were like the turtles we know, like, oh, they're cute. How can you not love them, so to speak? So, no, I just love it how, she starts to like implement herself like as April as we know it, kind of like badass, getting in the nitty gritty, getting her, hands dirty, so to speak.
Yeah, and let's face it. I mean, the title's not called April O'Neil in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, so she isn't. She's not a focus front character, but they continue to find great ways for her to be that incredible sidekick or that incredible partner that's part of the team, really. And that's they continue to do it. It delivers. It's part of the pacing that they're doing so well with here.
She eventually does get her own title, just so you know. It's like one of those micro series. Just eventually spins off. Don't worry, she'll get one.
Yeah, I feel like everybody gets a micro series. Did old Hob get a micro series?
That I'm not sure.
He might be like the only one who has this. I think even
and that's probably the one that should have one, right? I would read that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the bigger reveal here, though, besides Casey revealing himself to April as a vigilante, is when the turtles get in, they bust up this lab, they find that the cage is empty. Old Hobbs already been beat up, of course. You don't even get to see him get beat up on panel here. You find out that another set of ninjas beat him to the punch, and then this is where you get your first look at Karai, granddaughter of Shredder.
Right.
And who gets revealed here? Maybe the best splash panel in the series so far. You get your reveal of Shredder. So you get your first look at Karai, but yeah, look at the first reveal of Shredder there. Yeah. Andy, I remember when you read this for the first time, you immediately stopped everything and just sent me this image. So Andy, what are your thoughts here on seeing Shredder?
Dude, I can't really form a thought on that or a way to describe that feeling. So I'll just share the picture here in just a second. Yeah, I can do it right here. I'll share my screen really quick. I was in the middle of nowhere with no cellular service at all, at a campfire, at a campground. Like I said, I deleted everything off my iPad and downloaded like 3 gigs so I could sit and read this. I got to that page, immediately took this picture and sent it to Carson and said, "Oh my God, no way." I mean, it was an epic, like like with Krang, he's there. Shredder, he's here in the story somewhere, as far as like here and now. They're going to introduce him at some point, but the way they kind of teased up to it and then got you there, it was more about the journey than it was. Well, it was equally about the journey as it was the panel. It
was almost like a slow build, to your point.
Yeah.
They fed you a little bit of the foot in the beginning. You saw them come and steal the mutagen freaking formula and all that type of stuff. And and to your point, like you knew he was there. Like we know they're there. We're just waiting for him. When is it going to come? And then being in the middle of all of this, losing Splinter, the Mousers, Hob. It hits you almost out of left field, because not that you forgot Shredder was there, but like you're caught up into the story and like, all right, this is cool. Now April's getting introduced, and then I also just like how you still got that family tie aspect because it's the granddaughter that introduced them, and that is also too just I think like another building block, especially for you can say like the foot side of things, because now you got to remember like. With good and evil, like, yin and yang, and then you can see a lot of the times for me, how much, they hate each other and they go after things, but how much things are so similar and like they, really have the same beliefs in a certain sense. And that family foundation is always a big part of it. So I think it's cool that it's his granddaughter as well. That is, the big reveal, like Master Shredder.
And this scene was incredibly, boy, this really transported me to that scene where they introduced Shredder in the warehouse in the movie. You know what I mean? Yeah. This is more of a temple setting, but the grandiose, really tall, 3 or 4 levels up, the depth of the interior of the building and the wide aspect, it really kind of transported me back to that scene in the movie when they introduced him, and it had all of the people that they were training to be part of the Foot Clan there. Those 2, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so as we keep going, we kind of see how lost the brothers are without Splinter. And they're once again, we go back to the argument between Leonardo and Donatello, where they're just all about, reincarnation versus science, basically. And Raphael tries to be the hothead to butt in, but they're used to that. They don't want to hear from Raphael at this point. But who stops the argument is fun-loving pizza dude Michelangelo. When he gets mad, they know they need to stop what they're doing. So what did you think of this scene, Andy?
I'm trying to catch up to you because you're going through. We had the part where Shredder's granddaughter threw Splinter the sword, and he starts the battle. Oh, and then it cuts to that scene. Yeah,
I'm kind of trying to go fast through the because it's a lot of just battling with the Foot Clan. So we'll definitely get into that. But I definitely wanted to get into the scene where.
And your question was about the banter between the
the turtles just seem kind of lost at this point without Splinter.
And it's interesting because without Splinter, you kind of notice that they don't really become unhinged, but then they start picking at each other a little bit more, questioning. Yes. So it's interesting to see them kind of come a little unglued without Splinter.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, when Michelangelo is the one who has to cool off the team, that's not a good sign. Usually it should be, obviously Splinter, he's the one who, if he says something, they're going to do it. But obviously they don't have that full buy-in as Leonardo's leader yet. He's kind of been, appointed the oldest, but Donatello keeps kind of, challenging him on his leadership. But going back to what's going on with Splinter, this is where you really get to showcase Splinter's talents and abilities as just a ninja master, basically. Like, Shredder is just toying with him at this point, obviously. He keeps pitting him against these, like, random Foot Clan opponents. It's like there's this really big-looking dude with a chain. This guy doesn't stand a chance against Splinter. And then before you even get to see Karai in action even more, you get to see what's going on with Baxter and Old Hob and Krang. And there's this guy, Mr. Allen, who was the scientist from earlier, who answered that annoying ringing phone that Old Hob told him to pick up. And it turns out he's kind of a mole for the Foot Clan. So, and then one of my favorite parts is where you get the Turtles finally get a place to stay for the night. And what is it? This place looks awfully familiar. It's an antique shop that April's parents own. So, Chad, what was going through your head when they found this antique store?
Just laughter at first, I guess, of course.
Yeah,
What I mean? Like, yes, of course, right? Like, just one of those classic moments, once again, that he was able to throw in that, like, hey, it's, it's your Turtles. You know what I mean? Like, this is your Turtles. So just loved every moment about it. I was actually going to pull up that panel.
Nice.
Yeah, I love that. And then they're going through the comic book boxes in there.
Oh, yeah.
And I think they even pull out a couple of games. And, of course, Donatello pulls out, like, some piece of classic tube electronic.
Yeah.
It just plays to their strengths. It plays to the classic aspect of Turtles.
So, yeah, going back to the Splinter storyline with Shredder, he's obviously beaten the big member of the Foot Clan. When the Foot Clan members lose, they're supposed to be executed. Obviously, Splinter isn't going to execute anybody, so this only infuriates Karai and Shredder further. So this is where he just starts turning like multiple soldiers against him as well as Karai. And this is where you get like a ton of action from Splinter here. He's taken on multiple members of Foot. He's taken on Karai. But before we get to the conclusion of that battle, we kind of go back to Michelangelo. He's always getting pizza, man. They nailed that part of the character for sure. He's out getting food for the brothers, and there's a mysterious figure looking in the door. It's one of the what we find out to be the purple dragons. So I didn't watch a lot of the mid-2000s series. I dabbed into it here and there. Chad, do you have any feelings at all on the purple dragons?
Wasn't really my, I guess, series as well. I kind of dabbled into it, as you mentioned. One of those things that I've been wanting to kind of go back and rewatch. I'm sure as little man gets older, we'll probably be watching all those types of things. So I'll probably have more of an idea. But wasn't, I guess, necessarily something to me that I had known of them, you know what I mean? But I wasn't super excited. But then also at the same time, all right, cool, a new character or new character faction, so to speak, that, I can learn about and see, how they fit into this universe. And of course, they make them fit. So.
Mm-hmm. Andy, do you have any recollection at all on the Purple Dragons?
No, this is my first introduction to him, so I was a little lost at first, but I understand more allies for the Turtles, right? It's one thing I do remember from the 80s and 90s as a kid. They had quite a few allies. So for them to, like you said, they're taking a blender, they're putting all the best aspect of the Turtles, and they're throwing everything in there, and they're giving everything they've got here. So it just makes sense. It does flow well. It does seem to fit very well, but this makes me want to go back and learn more about them too.
Yeah, they pretty much have two things in common at this point. Luckily, their hatred for the Foot Clan and Casey Jones. Luckily, so that's just enough to make them have their differences at first. Obviously, Michelangelo confronting Malo, I think is her name, and the rest of the gang there, and eventually Casey comes and talks them down and kind of lets them know everything that's going on. But then you cut back to the main battle, and Splinter's just pretty much owned everybody. The only people pretty much left standing at this point are Karai, Shredder, and his next challenger, Alopex. So you kind of don't get to see too much of the battle, unfortunately. But they cut back and forth between the meeting of the Purple Dragons and Alopex versus Splinter. So because Alopex is kind of a new mutant herself and still learning the ways of the Foot, she doesn't stand a chance either against Splinter. So Splinter pretty much one of the other cool panels in this one is just Splinter challenging Oroku Saki. He says, "So Oroku Saki, do we settle this now, master to master?" And he, like I said, he just keeps getting all this stuff thrown his way, and he just keeps knocking them down one by one. And it's just a great scene if you're a Splinter fan here.
Yeah. I'm with you there. And then I guess to your point, as he's knocking them down one by one, Shredder, you start to see his patience start to run, you know what I mean? And then eventually he's like, yo, he's mine. Just give him to me, and that to me, I get, that one panel, I pulled it up. This is to me, I was like, yo, this panel right here just screams everything Turtles that you want, right? Just,
yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, I know we jumped a little ahead, but it all leads up to the big showdown, which you kind of expected, where they were, all right, so let's see, awesome. And then of course, how everyone else is brought in too is great.
And I like how he self-narrates a lot, being how tired and worn down he is, and yet he's not giving up.
Yeah. Well,
I'll go ahead, Chad.
I was just saying, it's just that drive for his sons, and I guess that promise that he is trying to keep for his dying wife, as you saw in the beginning. And one of my favorite, I guess, panels or a group of panels is when in that second volume, really early, as you see Splinter kind of going through the city, with the goods on his back, and then he reflects back to I guess the original time before he was reincarnated into the rat, of kind of the same thing, and that that irony that life is still the same no matter what time and what era he's in. And I don't know, it just goes to show you his drive as well, because it's always been the four sons that drove him, so to speak. So
it speaks to the being creatures of aspect, or creatures of habit aspect.
Oh, really. True that.
Even after reincarnation and surviving this long and coming back as a completely different animal, he's still Splinter. He's still, the boys are still the boys. And right before you hopped on, we actually talked about that callback, or that look back to feudal Japan, when he was running away after his wife being killed, and he was carrying Raphael and Donatello, and Leonardo was carrying Michelangelo. That was probably one of the first times as a Turtles fan, as a reader, that I actually got to see the nuances between the Turtles, that they were all different ages.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, they had different mindsets, different thought processes, and that makes Michelangelo so much more understandable, in my opinion. You know what I mean, from the reader's standpoint, and how important that played. I'm going off on a tangent now, but
no, bro, you're right on the money. And to your point, Leo being the oldest, and it shows why he's kind of the leader, why they kind of look up to him, and then him, you know, back to what I was saying earlier, like, you know, his undying loyalty to his dad, you know, and that pressure of sometimes being the oldest son, that kind of comes with that, you know, and how that all plays in. They nail it on the head. And to your point, perfect.
Being the, like Carson mentioned, being the strongest one there, so strong that he could actually carry a member of the family, whereas his father was carrying two.
Mm-hmm.
So it was. I want to go back and read it again now.
I got my laptop chargers. So one moment.
Oh, no worries. But yeah, going through this fight, there's a lot of cool imagery. Well, obviously, you know, it's an action style fight. There's going to be, but I was just kind of looking at this sequence, especially when, you know, Splinter's got the bow staff and Shredder's obviously got his gauntlets, and he cuts to seeing his family with the mother together, and that just puts him back into the fight when he's kind of losing his will to fight here. Obviously, and it kind of just keeps going back and forth at that point between the imagery of him kind of getting his vengeance at Oroku Saki, plus grieving his wife and his, you know, back then dead kids. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, obviously, that, you know, they're very much just going toe to toe the whole time until the turtles get there. So what do you guys think of just this sequence right here? It's a lot going on.
It's full tilt.
This is probably up until this point like the most like action-packed like volume. I mean, you get action in the first volume and the second one, but this one, like, and maybe the right term, like the action you want to see, so to speak, because, you know, the whole fighting before, you know, between Hobbs and how they're building up is great, but like as a Turtles fan, you want to see, you know, Foot, Turtles, Shredder, Splinter, all that, and you get all that in this, you know, volume. And like I said a little bit earlier, I love how, you know, the Turtles kind of just come busting in. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like, they just, like, you know, they're ready to go. And as you kind of said, you know, Splinter kind of gets that like re-energized feeling. Like once he gets that image, I feel like the Turtles got the same thing. Like once they knew Splinter was there, they're like, yo, our dad's here. Like, let's go get him, you know? And they just come busting down the door. And that's probably like my favorite part, you know?
Well, I mean, this is full tilt action, and one of the things that we talk about on Modern Men occasionally is we run into books where they're action packed, but the art doesn't convey the action very well. This conveys action. Dan Duncan conveys action incredibly well throughout the first 3 volumes here that I've been reading so well. And you know, this is one of the first books that I've actually had. It's been enjoyable to read digitally. I'm still a big proponent of having the comic book in my hand, the comic book or the trade, and reading in my hand. There is a convenience factor to the digital aspect, though, that I will take advantage of that if I need to or if I choose to. But I'll tell you what, this is one of the first books that I actually enjoyed reading digitally. And when you do the guided view, it doesn't decimate it like it does a lot of other books.
No, I mean, I have no problem with that guided view. I feel like as I've become more of a digital reader, I like, not that I don't like I love having the book in my hand, but there's something about, like, for instance, if I'm reading on my phone or my laptop or, you know, a tablet, that guided view, sometimes because it just focuses on that one panel, I can analyze everything on it, and sometimes normally see things I would probably like just kind of flip through, so to speak, as I'm just trying to read it and like look at everything, you know. But I like that guided view. I don't mean to go off on a tangent there, but I'm all about that guided view.
Well, I mean, it's like what one of the frustrations that I have a lot of times when we talk about on Modern Men is when you do that guided view, it takes you from panel to panel to panel to panel, and then next thing you know, 4 pages later, you're still panel to panel. These guys, this issue, it stops and pulls you back and gives you page views, half page views, larger views. So you read the panels, but then it pulls you back and it immerses you either right before you read the panels or right after you read the panels, which is a very important aspect in comic books. And Drew's talked about it too, about not getting the double page views or the full page views in digital. They actually do it fairly well, really well here. Like I said, this is probably one of the first reads I've done digitally that I actually enjoyed reading digitally. Everything else I've always had some sort of aspect or some sort of issue where I have some sort of complaint or knock on it, but not this run.
Yeah, so once we get into the action here, I love some of the matchups they establish here because I think they mean a lot long term. The first one that comes to mind here is Raphael and Alopex. That is definitely one to take note of when you see just Raphael punch Alopex right square in the face. So obviously there'll be more to that later. And then the one I really liked was Leonardo versus Karai. I feel like this is the first of many battles we're going to see of these two. And especially like once the battle doesn't last long between them here, because Karai, obviously we're going to see her learn a lot and become a much better and established fighter. Right now, there's a scene where basically, it's just like a culmination of everything Leonardo so far. He's a great fighter, but his beliefs, his brothers are kind of sour on what he believes because he's just taken everything Splinter says as fact. And, he's just like telling Karai, like, we don't stand a chance, but hey, apparently I'm the only one who believes in miracles, and just headbutts her and knocks her out of the fight. So I really enjoyed that scene. And then this is where you get like Michelangelo once again. He had the problem with the Mousers earlier. And then here, who does he just jump right in front of? Not even thinking. He's just going all in instinct. He tries to fight Shredder one-on-one.
Of course, right?
Yeah, of course. And that's obviously not going to work. So what did you guys kind of think about these matchups early on?
Oh, I think you kind of said it perfectly. Like, you kind of have the right matchups with each other. You got Leo versus Karai. You got Raph versus Lopez at first, and then of course, Raph just taking that big Raph moment. All right, I'm going after the big gun. You know what I'm saying? Like, he does not care, and I guess, being a Turtles fan, that's probably my favorite part, because that's just true Raphael style. Yeah. And it's one of those things like, all right, like, we know that he can't really beat Shredder, but we always know it's always a nice, good fight. He gets his licks in, and then, he gets beat down, but let's make it happen, So that's probably my favorite one, is when Raph kind of like just steps up to Shredder. Like, yeah, of course, I was expecting that from the moment you guys jumped into this room.
I didn't pick up on the pairings. I am now looking at it when you guys talk about it. I guess there's so much action going on here, and there's so much happening that I just kind of got too wrapped up to it and got going too fast to really pick up on that.
I mean, I think it's one of those things, like, as you said, you want to go back and read it. You'll probably like look into it and you'll like see it. But I don't think it was anything crazy. I just think it was, as I mentioned before, like that whole family versus family, right? And they just, he just kind of like paired everyone up, like, that were like similar to each other, I think, in each group, if you were to like to split them up and like, all right, yeah, we're against each other, but like, you guys are like, so.
Yeah, I definitely like the last part of the fight here as well, where Splinter, he's basically just like, listen, my sons, the only way you'll stand a chance is to fight together. Splinter knows they can't one-on-one Shredder. Just like that rooftop fight in that first movie, there's no way they're going to be able to take Shredder one-on-one. So luckily, Casey is the one who gets Splinter out of there. Leonardo's got a little bit of rage here. I think, there must have been that Leonardo micro series where he met Shredder previously or something like that, because they seem to already know each other. But basically, they give Shredder a nice little attack, and then they decide they need to go, obviously, because that's when, who was it that was just like, we got what we came for, we need to finish. Yeah, I think it was actually Leonardo who wanted to get out of there, but he's like, we got to give him one at least. So they each hit him with like an attack from the side. But I like Shredder's last words to him here. He goes, yes, Flea, you only delay the inevitable. This does not end here. I am unyielding. I am unstoppable. I am Shredder. And Leonardo's response is, he goes, I am unimpressed. And he throws a ninja star just right next to his head just to show he could have hit him right in the face. So what did you guys think overall of this like last fight sequence here?
No, awesome. Each turtle getting their lick in. As you mentioned, Splinter, reminding them they're stronger together as a unit, which has always been like the mantra, from Splinter. And, they make their getaway because, as we all know, like, you live to fight another day. And as much as I'm sure they wanted to like kind of go and make it happen, they knew that they had to like get out of there, save Splinter, and that they their work has just begun, so to speak. And that to Andy's point with the guided view, one of my favorite panels is like when they're actually leaving the warehouse, and this is just a panel. It's not like a full page spread or anything like that. But when you actually you see Casey with Splinter and everything like that, and they're all like hopping out. And to your point, like this is like a small panel, but you get that feel big splash page, so to speak, with all the detail and everything like that. So
Dan Duncan's art does an incredibly well job of packing detail into those smaller panels, or sometimes even less detail actually helps that out more in that guided view digitally, I think. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so the final two scenes here, one is just you finally get to see Baxter Stockman turn on Old Hob. He officially fires him figuratively and literally with a pistol to the chest. And then the people with Krang inject Baxter with some sort of knockout serum. And they go, bring Stockman and leave the cat. It appears the time has come, gentlemen, for plan B. So that's where we leave off with Baxter, Old Hob, and Krang. And then you finally get the scene. Casey calls April. It's like, you better get here now. Splinter's awake. And you finally end the trade with Splinter meeting April. And April is able to thank Splinter for saving her life. And that is where we end Trade 3. So what are your guys' final thoughts on Trade 3 here? Chad, I'll start with you.
Finally, we got Shredder, like all this build up, and then it seems weird, but like you have 3 volumes that really feel like one volume. It really feels like this was the like overall, story arc, and it was a really nice way to end it. It was a great way to make sure you got all the characters that you love, introduce some new characters, some people that may have not have known before. And it's just like the cherry on top. And it's just like, all right, well, you see the end there. And of course, I'm sure at that time when it was happening, people probably thought it was the end, but you're probably like, there's no way this is the end, right? It can't be. So you're just excited to see what that next part is.
And even if it didn't continue on, I felt pretty satisfied. Thankfully it does, though.
Yeah, right. Yeah, to your point, it's a nice ending, but I guess as a fan, you're like, man, I want more, like give me more. So, and thank God give us more.
If they were like structuring like a new series of movies or TV show or something, I feel like the first 12 issues or 3 trades here would be a great format of story to put into like a movie or a series, basically. Where you have that, like, you have the origin of the Turtles, how they met. They've introduced a new character, an Old Hob, another one later down the line, Alopex. But you kind of get everything you would want if you're just a casual Turtle fan watching the cartoon back in the day or a couple of the movies, or you get that showdown with Shredder. You get Casey Jones and April meeting each other and then meeting the Turtles. They kind of give all of the old-time fans everything they would want to see. You get Krang and Baxter Stockman thrown in there. They feel like they're the most tacked on part, in my opinion, but you still get them, which is great because they can start building that story and telling that, in the future volumes. So there's a lot of great points to hang on to for their next volumes, but it does have a nice conclusion here where the family is all together and kind of at peace.
And Shredder's almost, Shredder's never truly 100% defeated, but this was definite enough that he got his ass kicked and you're satisfied as a reader, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Andy, you got so much more to read, my friend.
It has begun. All right. Well, big thank you guys for joining me here and finally making me continue this Turtle read. I've been saying I was going to do a show on at some point and review this stuff. So I just needed some Turtle brothers to help out with that. I definitely want to do this again in the future because I can't wait to read issues or volumes 4 and 5. And I hope you guys are available to join me at some point. Don't know if this will be a weekly show because, hey, we're all reading a lot right now and want to get our normal reads in, but I definitely want to incorporate this into a schedule of some sort. So, Andy, where can people find you?
Oh, man, where can't you find me lately? So many good reads, so many good people to hang out with. You got Monday night Modern Men on the Comic Core. Tuesday night, I'm hanging out here with you. You got the Wednesday greatest comic book show ever. Tuesday night, yeah. There's more Tuesday night information coming your way too. I usually try to tune in. And then Andy Given Thursdays. And speaking of that, this Thursday, with everything that's been going on lately, I'm really excited for more Star Wars content with the announcement that's going on. But this Thursday, we're going to do some sort of Star Wars speculation news episode. I'm just speculation news, whatever. I mean, it's talk about everything that's going on with the Mandalorian. It's going to roll into some of the comic book stuff and whatnot. But I'm really excited about that. And there's a lot that I can learn about the Star Wars universe. So we're getting a couple of cool people on. Carson might be on, and there's a couple other guests that we have lined up for that.
Sure you don't want to read Dark Empire again?
So good.
I'll read it again.
I tried to convince them.
It's so good. Read it, Andy. Do it.
Yeah, we read it on Modern Men, and these guys, I think it just felt dated.
Yeah, which happens. Which happens, I guess.
Chad, you got a show coming up here shortly, don't you?
Yes.
Where do people find you?
You can find me 90 MFC. We'll be doing our weekly show, Stash or Trash, at 10 o'clock in about 30 minutes. As little 90, he can't wait for it to go off, as you guys can hear. But we review recent reads. We also just look at upcoming, variants coming out and different covers, and we just stash them or trash them. You guys can join us in the chat, stash and trash what you want. And other than that, you can find me on MCE Friday nights. I work with those guys, and then Silver Age Sundays on the Conquistadorks. You never know when I'll pop up there. But I want to thank Seawood. Thank you, Andy, for letting me join you guys for some Turtle Talk. Review and a Half Shell, Turtle Talk Tuesdays. You can use those names, Seawood. This is a name. You can use those names because we're all, as you mentioned, we're all Turtle Brothers here, and it's all love, brothers. So don't worry about that.
I think we'll just make it Turtle Tuesday, and if we somehow are doing this long enough to complete all these, we'll just start on another Turtle read. We'll figure out something, man. I think we'll meet up here more than once, definitely to talk Turtles. But I know you got to get going, so we'll just go ahead and wrap this up. Big thanks for everybody for staying with us in the chat tonight. But until next time, cowabunga, guys.
Cowabunga.